What happened? What went wrong?
Well, I think I've been set up fairly badly here today.
Right. And in particular, what reason?
We're seeing somebody just saying he's been set up.
Okay then, and on that bombshell!
Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the Butterfly Effect podcast. I'm Liam, joined by Jack.
What is up?
And this is part 7 of the Devil in Me analysis. Right, so we come back, and if you caught the last episode, you would know that Jack and I had the same ending, in that we decided to squish Kate. Very horrible of us, I know, but we see a lovely shot of the aftermath of that, almost like a fly getting swatted against the wall. It's pretty brutal. And then it instantly breaks out into Jamie in a chase scene. Now, I imagine it would have stuck there for you, mate, but I just want to say that before, with Mark, I had Mark get captured because I can't do heartbeat sequences to save my life. And when I was hiding under a table, he got caught. So I had an extra scene here where Mark had to break out his cuffs while he was like on a pipe. It's interesting because, like, I mean, he broke out super easy. I actually wasn't, you know, he basically just woke up from his KO from the chloroform or the paint thinner and just got out pretty easy to get to the next section. But what I have heard from someone is that me being caught means that I missed out on a bunch of clues. So what I gather happened is that when you got away from Dumet before and you successfully did the hiding sequences, you would have found a room with a lot of clues inside. And I think they did a similar thing in Until Dawn, where when Sam runs away from the psycho, if you don't get caught, you get this whole room just filled with clues and goodies. Yeah. So I think, you know, we will come to learn that Mark is a little plot armor heavy going forward. But I must say, though, that as a way to counteract it, I quite like what they've done here, because I got Mark caught, and despite the fact it's non-fatal, there still is a bit of consequence in the fact, mate, that I would have lost out on a lot of clues, and you would have had that reward for, you know, escaping with Mark at that point. So I just wanted your light on, you know, that comment, mate.
To be honest, the first thing that did actually come to mind was Until Dawn, with the whole thing with Sam and the psycho. And yeah, I think it's a balanced way of doing it. Because I mean, the thing is that you couldn't, from a building a game perspective, you couldn't have whenever you got caught that they die every single time. So, I mean, I've got to admit though that I was surprised when you said that he just got chloroformed and then got taken off. I was thinking, I wonder how that develops, you know, plot wise. And I did actually catch a little bit of your gameplay before, and I saw he has to just sort of get out the cuffs, and then that's pretty much it. But I do agree, I think that it's a fair compromise given the situation. As far as the clues though, I can't remember what ones I found. I do definitely remember, like I said in the last episode, seeing this mannequin where he just screams at you saying, press the button, and I never did. I wimped out and walked off. But there was a couple of things, but I just can't remember what they were.
Oh yeah, interesting, because I never would have saw that. And I think from your perspective as well, if there was no sort of consequence for me, for example, missing out on a load of clues, I think you would have every right to feel a bit peeved there that, like, we would have got the same halfway, despite the fact that I fucked up and you didn't. So yeah, kind of a nice way of doing things, you know. And like you say, it can't always be fatal, so it's nice that they have, you know, a way of doing that, rewarding the player with clues, which I would have missed out on a bunch apparently. So we move on to Jamie. We get a customary Shining reference, and then we get a chase scene that breaks up into a roof escape. Now, the first thought I had was how predictable it was going to be. She's shimmying past a window, and I was like, Demet, it's going to be at that window. And he was. We come up to one of our first sort of choice things in this episode, mate, where you get to hide or run on the rooftop. What did you choose?
I just add something here, because I had Erin in this as well. It wasn't just Jane. So she wasn't there for the most part, But you know when they're shimmying along, this is actually something I find really interesting from looking at your gameplay as well. Because you were on your own, I think you had QTEs, whereas for me, I had Jamie and Erin shimmying along. And then, you know, the moment when he grabs Jamie while she's shimmying, I think Jamie just tells Erin, you know, run off sort of thing, you're fine. And that's when Jamie climbs up onto the roof. So there's like a little bit of a difference there in our gameplay.
Yeah, and I actually must say, mate, before, because that is a very valid point, I will be talking from a perspective that is very much a one-man show, or one-woman show, I should say. Jamie, because at this point, we kind of get a gender break-off, you know, like, if all the men survived, they'll kind of rally up, and if all the women survived, they'll rally up, and we kind of get this split. Now, me having killed Erin and Kate off, Jamie has a very solo playthrough for the rest of the game. Now, I will be mentioning a lot this version because this is the only version I've seen. I've just sort of heard about drips and drabs about what other people can do. And I know very much that, for example, scenes such as like being in the house later with a dog and, you know, shimmying on this roof now that you've taught me. And also like when you're running away from the killer in the barn or going for a maze, I know very much that you can have people with you. So apologies in advance if I very much make it sound like it's just Jamie. That's just the version I'm going with. And Jack will come to find out what he had. But yeah, it'll be nice to see when we clash opinions here as well, mate, because we're going to get like different things that happen. And yeah, I'm really intrigued to see what happens when more than one person is in these scenes. But anyway, we'll go back to the rooftop, mate, where you run and hide.
Yeah, so God, it comes back to this whole head and heart thing again. I feel like I went in too deep on this whole, you know, the head decision seemed to be the safe one. But I chose hide, and almost as soon as I picked it, I regretted it. Because I was like, he wasn't that far behind me. I was thinking, it's going to bring about a heartbeat sequence. I just know it. And sure enough, it did. And I managed to pass them. He was literally stood around the corner. And she had to like shimmy around the next corner, and then he looked at where she was, so it was like very, very close. And then it sort of goes on from there, and it ultimately culminates with this fight on what looks like some scaffolding. And no, I actually sort of kicked his ass here, and he went falling. And this is when Jamie and Erin then reunite. Erin sort of pops out and she goes, "Oh my god, you did it, you killed him." And I was thinking at the time, I was like, no, there's still time in this game. Something's wrong here. And they then come together and they start to walk off, and then you just see him stand up again and start to chase after them. So is there much difference with what happened for you, mate?
Well, I also chose to hide, so I can't tell you what happens on the run, because I'm yet to learn that as well, mate. But I can tell you what happens if you hide and fail the heartbeat sequences, if you like.
Oh, God, no, not again. God.
Yeah, so obviously my Achilles heel heartbeat sequences, I can't do them. And you know what? I've since learned, mate, that although I'm not saying I'm good at games, but I will say that I definitely had a dodgy controller. I've since had someone else take a look at it, and he said, yeah, your controller's fucked, mate. You need a new one. So I basically tackled this whole game with a ruined controller where the X button doesn't tap on time, or it doesn't correlate with when you press it.
What happened? What went wrong?
Well, I think I've been set up fairly badly here today.
Right. And in particular, what reason?
We're seeing somebody just saying he's been set up.
Okay then, and on that bombshell!
But, you know, I took it in stride anyway, and then, you know, Charlie, no, what's his name? Grantham finds you, and he straight up drops you off the rooftop, and Jamie falls. But she falls through the scaffolding to kind of shield her fall. So she ends up on the ground, and then she'll, like, run off towards, like, the mazes where Grantham kind of magically appears, Jason Voorhees style, like he always does, to chase after you. So it sounds very much like a non-fatal choice, a bit of a nothing choice really. It just means that I missed out on a scaffolding fight, and my heart was in my mouth for Jamie, thinking she had died for a moment, possibly. Funny enough though, you end up in the maze, and you have to pass another heartbeat sequence, and I managed to succeed that one. So Grantham walked off, and then I was left to my devices to do this maze scene. But yeah, thoughts on that, mate?
I cannot believe she survived falling off that rooftop. And I didn't really see that. Obviously, you said that the scaffolding, cushioned the fall a little bit. But after what I saw of him falling off and smacking on the ground, I'm thinking he should be dead, but this is a game, so he won't be dead. But God, yeah, that's amazing, that. But it does sound like it's a nothing choice. But as far as this maze thing goes, again, another little nod to The Shining. Absolutely loved it, and I think that this particular section is up there with the section that you play with as Erin as well. When the lights go out and you've got the microphone and you're wandering around listening to all these voices. They've definitely excelled in this game at delivering other types of horror instead of just jump scares. Whether it's just eerie, you feel quite claustrophobic. Of course, you're in a maze, so there's like little offshoots and things, which I did actually go down pretty much everything, I think, because I was looking for clues and odals and stuff. But a really, really good scene. There's a little puzzle thing in there where you've got to grab the lever, you undo that, and then it opens up a little secret passageway. Like this whole section, I was sort of bricking it a little bit because of like the audio and just the general atmosphere, but it's going to be one that I remember quite a lot, I think.
No, I completely agree. And what you mentioned on the horror, I completely agree. It's not like, I think the Erin hallway scene is probably the strongest element of horror in the game, but it's certainly up there. And I feel the game got pretty creepy towards the end, even if we're talking Mark in the changing rooms or, like going around the lighthouse at the end. It amped up the horror in the way I like, less from jump scares, more from the eeriness. And I really must, take my hat off to Supermassive Games for that. Yeah, I really like this maze scene. I think it was really refreshing that, we were out the hotel. I was starting to tire a little bit from the endless hallways, with a lack of clues in them, like me scouring behind every table to no avail. It was nice to be outside, and this maze scene, it very much reminded me of either like Harry Potter Goblet of Fire or like the outside of like, James Bond from Russia with Lava. I really liked the kind of, the ambience of it all. And yeah, like I found a load of clues and it was just really nice. There was the whole thing where you could look at the key in the middle to kind of work your way out. I never ended up using it. I just decided to just check every corner anyway. I hit every dead end on purpose like you did. And yeah, there's not too much to say really. It's but it's a good way of doing quite a long scene of picking up clues where it threw some healthy puzzles in without being fairly tedious like I thought maybe the spa scene was, or the scene where, Mark goes to get the keys earlier when Kate's waiting on him. I felt this was the strongest, certainly, part of the game for collecting clues and just like kind of in a walk scene without the cutscenes, if you get what I mean.
Absolutely. Yeah, because you had an objective, didn't you? It was to escape the maze, but then you had a puzzle within that, whereas the spa, it was just sort of a little bit more casual, wasn't it? There wasn't really anything going on objective-wise. So yeah, I get what you mean.
So like, we managed to get underground and go back up on the outside, back into the gardens, and there's a few bits, where like you can go in a shed and you find like Kurt Hall's lanyard, and then it kind of culminates in this bit where there's a tunnel full of Grantham maze, aren't there?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, I don't know if you thought what I thought, but it's just like, well, one of these is the killer, right?
Yeah. Exactly. In Detroit, how you had the bit with Connor, and he was like looking at the different deviants as to see which one was moving. I had a little bit of that. I was like, I wonder if I can see if there's one of them moving before, because I was literally expecting me to walk past, and then for there to be a sudden cutscene where a hand comes out and grabs you. And then when it didn't, and then it changed to a cutscene, you could see him come up behind. I was like, oh yeah, no, I was right. The killer is amongst them. But and then the chase continued. But see, how long was he stood there for? Like, if you sort of pull yourself out of the moment for a second, they're busy in the maze, and he sat there thinking, oh, they're going to come out in a minute, so I'm going to position myself next to these other Grantham maze and be very still and wait for them. It's quite a funny thought, really. But yeah.
Does that also mean he has 5 there on standby so he could slip into one of the spots?
Yeah, he's
Someone
like,
ever finds themselves walking through that tunnel.
yeah, leaves a little gap for himself. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, we get through that, and I've had mixed opinions of whether people like that jump scare or not. I do find it funny where it's like he's clearly one of them, and Jamie screams as if like she didn't expect it. We break off into this whole chase scene where you take the you're trying to take the axe, and one of the first choices that come, mate, is do you barricade the door or do you run?
Yeah.
What did you pick?
I picked Barricade.
Yeah, same here.
Just thinking, axe, you want a little bit more time, you might need that time, so yeah, I thought I've got the option to barricade, I'll take it.
I always thought as well, whenever they throw that choice to barricade or run, now usually in Supermassive Games history, barricade is always the correct option. In Until Dawn, it's the way you save the wolf. It's the way that buys you more time, like in the when you're in the basement. But when it happened and I chose to barricade, I instantly thought the quarry when you're playing as Emma and the wolf jumps through the treehouse window anyway, and barricading the door had no effect. And I thought, this Grantham Dumais has just walked out of shadows. He's quite a slippery guy. I was like, am I going to regret that? Luckily enough, he didn't. He had to break through, and I think it did give me a little bit of time. The next choice follows swiftly after, mate, and it's climb versus run. What did you pick?
I picked climb.
Oh, I picked run, so this is going to be super interesting. Tell us how your game unfolded.
So bear in mind, I've got Amy and Erin, right? Together, they're running. And Erin says, oh, there's a door at the end. And the choice came up. And again, I fell for that whole go for the head thing. I found it a bit odd. Like, why did it say climb? And I was like, there must be a reason for it, because the obvious one is run. So I guess I overthought it. Jamie then climbed, thinking that Erin would come with me, but she didn't. She started to run towards the door, so I was above her and she was beneath me. And she struggled to get the door open, and the killer come in with the axe and killed her on the spot.
Yeah, so this is interesting because my brother did the same, except with Jamie and Kate. Because my brother succeeded the screwdriver thing, right? But he killed Erin off earlier in the game.
Right.
He had Jamie and Kate at the scene, and I'm going to tell you later, because there will be a section I will bring it up in this episode where we talk about glitches, guys. But essentially, his game was completely glitched, where a lot of his QuickTime events didn't come up, so a lot of his characters ended up dying. I will talk more about this later, because it actually is really pulled from Supermassive Games, and it will be one that I will sort of lay into later. But essentially, he went up, and Kate was kind of... I think he was playing as Kate, actually. So he went up as Kate, and then Jamie went to the door, because I think you predominantly play as Kate if Kate's alive at this point in this section.
Right.
Now, he went up as Kate, and then Jamie died by default at the door. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about what I did, because I ran. And because I was solo, I just ran to the door and just simply had to button mash the door, and I got through. And now my thought is that maybe you were supposed to go to the door and button mash, but because your partner had to do it, either they fail by default, or what I thought at the time is because there was like a glitch for my brother, maybe he was supposed to button mash, but the option didn't show. So what happened for you is you were Jamie, and you escaped out the top window. Erin was caught at the bottom and got hacked to death by the killer.
Basically, mate, it was a straight 50-50 choice. That's what I come down to it as. If I was playing as Erin, she got to the door and I failed the button mash, then the sequence would make sense. But because I climbed, presumably me and Erin needed to barge the door open. That's all I can guess anyway. Which, of course, that didn't happen, and the killer just got his axe out, put it into her chest, and she lay dead on the ground. So I was like, oh, that's another time now where I was like, oh, I feel a little bit hard done by, I'm not gonna lie. But, there we go.
You know what, it kind of throws logic out the window, considering I, as my solo character, went to the door, and got out as just Jamie. So yeah, like, there kind of is a flaw to that choice, isn't there, mate? And we've discussed it before, but I would love to make a separate video on whether the Devil in Me choices are too harsh, because there are a few instances where this happens, and it is a really interesting debate whether you should think that, oh well, sometimes in life it is luck, so like it's just one of those things, or if you think all the choices should have some logical clue thing to them to kind of justify your choices, because I kind of feel like me and you are sort of robbed of a character here based off of a 50-50 heads or tails, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I thought at the time anyway. And I thought, I'd saved Erin so many times at this point. It felt such a bum note for her to die that way because she couldn't open a fucking door. Like,
yeah. I mean, on the bright side, mate, pat on the back, because she can die at like something like 4 or 5 different points at this point. It took me 3 bites of the cherry, but it took you about 4 or 5. So you got her really far. I know a lot of people killed off Erin way before this, so you did fairly well there.
Yeah.
Like it culminates into this fight scene. Now I know I've seen premonitions of Jamie and Kate on this like cliff edge where Grantham Dumay grabs Jamie and there's a shotgun involved. Now it's weird because obviously me and you would have been solo at this point. I guess we have the same ending where we kind of get pushed off a cliff a little bit, or there's this sturdy woodwork and then we kind of fall down this cliff, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So we would have had a solo Jamie story from here on out. But yeah, like I wonder what does happen though if you have 2 characters alive at this bit, like how that ends in order for 2 characters to either fall down the cliff. So that'll be really interesting to visit. We play again as Mark and we go around to this like swimming pool. And I've got not much to comment on. It is quite a big section, but I feel like I wouldn't say it was very fillery, but it was very clue based. You find out a lot about like the Morello deaths and stuff. One thing I do want to say though is that I mentioned it briefly before. I just really like the horror element. There was some ruffling going on in the changing rooms. There's like the dark corners and stuff, really unnerving. And then it gets really freaky towards the end where the lights, the sensor lights outside come on when you're out, when you're inside even. And I just thought that was a really neat touch, and I just really appreciated the horror scene. But honestly, I've got not much to comment on unless you do for this Mark section.
No, honestly, just to echo what you've just said there about the horror sequences, I was thinking, God almighty, you know what was honestly playing on my mind? I was looking around for places to hide because I was almost sensing that a hide sequence was going to come up, where it says hide, and run to the arrow. And because I was hearing all these noises, I was thinking something's definitely around here. But thankfully not. But I think it was in this section with Mark where I found the last of the pictures. I think in terms of a quick sort of update, I found all of the pictures in this game apart from the Directive 8020 one. So I did get a couple of achievements out of that. Other than that, mate, I've not got much to add.
Yeah, one thing I do want to add actually for this Mark section is I think it was at this point where I clocked on. I was like, you know what? I think this guy could be Mr. Plot Armor, because there was a section I could have easily got killed off, and it didn't throw a quick time event. It didn't throw a fatal thing. I failed a heartbeat, and all he did was get captured, and he wriggled out like super easily, and I didn't have a choice in that. So I was just thinking, well, this is the guy with the plot armor. And I was also thinking it's dead interesting that they probably gave it to what I would argue is the bleakest character. I don't hate Mark, I just think he's weaker than the other four. Yeah. But yeah, so I just thought that was interesting, and I kind of, I gathered that thought at this point. The whole section ends with you kind of going outside this door, and I succeeded the quick time event, but I wonder what would have happened if you failed it, if you would have tripped outside the door and landed on your face or something. But yeah, really interesting that he's back outside and he's on his way to the lighthouse. Now, me and you would have had another section here because we managed to keep Charlie alive.
Yeah.
We're back as Charlie and we're in the gardens. Because we're in the gardens, I was wondering if we'd reunite with Jamie at this point, but instead, what happens is we kind of reunite with another friend who we will have going forward. We've kind of found a dog bowl before for a dog called Connie, and I kind of put two and two together and was like, okay, well, this is the dog here. I don't know about you, mate, but I'm always super nervous when they chuck a dog into a horror game.
Yeah, and I'll say this now. I literally thought this at the time, that if it comes to a situation where I've got to defend the dog, I'm doing it. I don't know what I've got this weird. I absolutely love dogs. You know, just talking about real life now. And I didn't care if it got one of them killed off. I was going to defend that dog no matter what. So
I say the same thing.
You don't need to bark at me, mate. I'm going to save you if need be later on.
That's it. And like, to echo you, I said the exact same thing in my gameplay. Yeah. I basically said, oh, if it comes between like killing a dog or one of my characters, I'm saving the dog. I'm sorry, but we're both dog owners in real life. It's just like, yeah, do not chuck an animal at me and not expect me to throw my body in the line. And we'll talk more about a choice in the next episode. But yeah, like it does kind of culminate to something along those lines. But Charlie ends up reuniting with Mark afterwards, and they mention a few things. They recap on the incineration room, how they thought they were dead, and Charlie's confused that Mark was able to watch this. Mark sort of reveals Erin's death, which, he knew for me anyway. He probably wouldn't have done that for you because, Erin died while Mark was there with them. So Charlie shed a little tear at Erin's death kind of thing. One thing that I did find was interesting was Mark mentioned, Erin died, and my bearing sort of said Mark was suspicious of Charlie because of this whole accusation angle. Now, I know it can culminate in a bunch of stuff later if you have all the characters alive. It never really did for me, but it was interesting to see the kind of motions of what could happen if you do go down that accuse Charlie route. So we'll touch on that later as well. We'll end this whole section with this final house sequence and slaughterhouse sort of scene, and then we'll cap this episode, mate.
Yeah.
So you kind of walk and you're trying to get into this house, and so like you told me earlier that there's the top right window and then there's the door to the left. Now you assumed, right, that they were both just separate entrances into the building, right?
Did, and I literally, because one of them, don't you have to like shimmy or balance along a beam to get to? And I was thinking if I went into that top right one, it would trigger a cutscene. It was the exact opposite. I'll then push the box down, climbed up, dropped in, and that triggered a cutscene. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to revisit there, am I? And I was thinking, I've clearly missed something, which obviously you told me I had. It was the final picture. Was there any clues in there or anything?
Yeah, so you've got the gold frame, which we'll briefly mention in a bit, and there's a drawer where you've got to use a business card to get it open, and you find out stuff about Monday's medical history and some things about behavioural issues he had as a kid, and some stuff about bronchitis that's super interesting, and probably would have reinforced your theory a bit more that he was a pretty problematic child. But yeah, so like we look at this gold frame, and we'll do a more in-depth video on it, so we won't dwell on it too much. But mate, Directive 8020, brief thoughts.
It looks brilliant, doesn't it? In terms of the visuals, it looks such a departure from what we've seen already, which, of course, it's going to be set in space, so that's to be expected. But we're going to get a bit of sci-fi horror now, mate. Like, it's going to mix in some of the genres. I'm actually quite looking forward to it. And you think as well, it's strange because there's potential for 2 sci-fi horror games next year, maybe, obviously with Directive 8020, but then of course we're going to be covering the Telltale game as well, aren't we? I'm trying to think what the bloody name of it is now.
The Expanse.
Expanse, that's it. The Expanse.
You're not wrong, and being a massive Aliens fan, it gave me vibes off of that, and also a film called Event Horizon, and we'll talk more about it in the other video, guys. But yeah, like super interested. Let us know your thoughts on if you're excited for this game. But yeah, one thing I want to briefly mention, I know we're kind of at the half an hour mark now, but but I want to mention it anyway, is that this is the scene, right, where I made a comedy short about it, but my Mark was super glitched. So Mark was walking into the door, waiting for that cutscene to unlock, and he was just doing the muck shuffle where his legs were going inwards and outwards, and I was just Charlie gathering clues while Mark was just stuck there. Now, while I had this, as funny as it was, and I'm kind of glad it happened because it didn't affect my game too much, I just wanted to stop and really bring the topic of glitches up, mate, because supermassive games, we're kind of renowned for having them. I've encountered a fair few. Man and Medan, I had like the ghost on the toilet that was like, just alive, just looking at me. I had like the thing earlier in this game where like I couldn't pick up a clue that you had the same one. House of Ashes, a lot of people shared the same one as me, where your Salim and Jason locked you in a cell and you have to like shimmy and crawl for like 10 minutes to get out, which just shouldn't be an issue in a video game. I've heard that a lot of issues with glitches in this game, mate, and I think The Devil in Me might just be the most glitched Supermassive Games project we've ever had. I'll give you some examples of things that some horror stories I've heard. I've seen a video on Reddit where Charlie walks across like the balance beam to get to the lighthouse, and he's in the air and he's teleporting around. I've heard issues of people going outside the map. I've heard issues of characters T-posing. I've heard things about people leaving Kate's makeup mirror just being left floating in the air. A common one I've heard is Mark's camera just not being in his hand, so he's filming with like an invisible camera. Now, my brother, his game was completely ruined by glitches. The big thing for him is that quick time events wouldn't show up on screen. So he got people killed through heartbeat sequences because his heartbeat sequence display never showed up. He had button mashes that he couldn't do because the button mash screen wouldn't show up. Dialogue that just wasn't there. So he ended up saying nothing because the timer ran out. And it's just really interesting to hear that my opinion was a little bit like, well, you know what, glitches are kind of fun, especially if they're minor. I quite like them in many senses because although it takes away from the horror element that they are trying to achieve, it is nice to have a little laugh here and there. I do love a little glitch personally, I don't mind it too much. But after hearing what I said about my brother's experience where his game got completely ruined because he killed 2 or 3 characters off through glitches, I mean, what is your thought on that, mate?
It's such a shame, isn't it? Because your first playthrough is your golden playthrough. Like, your brother's gonna like undoubtedly go back through this game, and even if there are patches and there are fixes, it takes the beauty out of it a little bit because he's gonna know what's coming in a way, and you'll be able to do the quick time events, but it loses that freshness. Speaking for me personally, I did have a glitch in this bit as well. Nothing major. I think it's just like this random item in the slaughterhouse. It looked like some sort of tool or equipment. It was just floating in midair. And it's almost similar to what you were saying about Kate's thing as well. That's it for me with glitches in this game. I always seem to come out on the good side of things. Relatively when it comes to glitches, but I've got to say I do feel sorry for those that have experienced them in such a way that it really does impact on your first playthrough, because as I said, I think it's just one of those things that you can't really forget. It's happened to you.
Yeah, of course, that's it. Because I'm aware that Supermassive Games are going bigger and better for us, and I get that issues will come with that. They've given us all these features, they're giving us a longer game, the inventory. So with that, there probably will be little hiccups along the way. And we know that they do patches. They did it for the Quarry when you had Constance's wig glitch. And they'll do the same, and I'm pretty sure this game will get fixed. But like you say, I agree, it loses that freshness, and your blind playthrough really is your golden playthrough. So it sucks that some people have turned away and said, I'm going to have to wait for the patch because I can't play the game. Now, I know certain engines are better than other ones for it. For example, there are a lot of reports that the PS5 is extremely glitched for this game. It's apparently the PS4 seems to be a lot better than the PS5 for actually playing this game. But yeah, just let us know in the comments, guys. We might do another separate video on this, we might not. But let us know about some glitches you've experienced, perhaps. because it's just really interesting to know, and it's one that we really hope that Supermassive Games can iron out over time, because it, like Jack says, it's a complete shame when glitches can completely ruin your experience like that. But to move on from that, mate, we'll get back into the story now. We move inside this building, and we'll end it on this final choice, but there's not too much. There's a tape, more stuff on Monday. I think, you look at like Martinez, this cop that, possibly dies. And then, the killer, as always, comes into the same room as you. Now, the whole thing ends on a little bit of a choice, mate, where you're playing as Charlie and you have to hide in a freezer. Tell us about what happens for you, mate.
I simply had a heartbeat sequence, and I managed to pass it. I remember looking though, because there was a very particular shot where the killer's walking around and Charlie's like looking out, like, tipping the lid to look out into the room. And I'm thinking, how the hell is the killer not seeing me here? Because I've got my lighter out, so you can see this orange glow, this orange line coming from this bin or whatever it is. He obviously doesn't. He then walks off, shuts the door, and you're able to climb back out and carry on exploring.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I thought the exact same thing. Super dumb how he's peering out and the light's just glowing out. And when you're looking kind of through the killer's eyes, you just sort of see Charlie in the background. Not only is he speaking, but he's just lit up his entire corner. And it just looks really dumb. Yeah, of course, I will let you know here that it's a heartbeat sequence, so of course I failed it. It got to the third one, and of course it's a fatal choice here, and it resulted in a death for me. So yeah, like the killer opens the freezer, and it was frustrating because I felt strongly like I hit it exactly in the middle, but the thing went red, and maybe it was an issue with my controller, as I discussed before.
Well, I think I've been set up fairly badly here today.
Right.
Maybe I'm just being salty and I am bad at games. But either way, yeah, he lifted the freezer, stabbed me in the shoulder, dragged me out on the table, stabbed me to death a few times, stuck a hook in my throat, and then reeled the hook so Charlie, went upwards. And kind of quite a beautiful poetic death in a way, because he still had the lighter in his hands and the lighter was just lit. Like his Zippo lighter was just kind of like, still on while he was in the air. But yeah, he just was like hooked and crucified basically. And it was a really kind of like beautiful in a way, because when I was playing Mark in the later scenes, you just see his body just suspended in the background and it's really brutal. But yeah, really gutting, because obviously I saved him in the incinerator, I saved him in the grinding mill, I had 2 close shaves there, and he was my favourite character, and yeah, I got him so far just for this stupid heartbeat sequence, which either me or my controller just couldn't do, and the heartbeat sequences just kept coming up. I succeeded 2 in the whole game, mate. So if it's my controller that's messed up, or it's me that just can't physically do them, it just sucks for me that they came so often as they did. Because yeah, it killed off my favourite character, so I was left with 2 characters at this point out of 5. Yeah, thoughts on my whole sequence there, mate?
Oh wow! It did. So wait, does Mark just stay sat in his little container then throughout all of this?
Oh yeah, and I completely moan about that in my game. I'm like, Mark, help him! But nah, he uselessly just sits in there. Because I kind of think as well is that Mark, big physical bloke, I reckon this guy could probably go toe to toe with the killer, especially if Charles is there as well, because that guy's fit as a butcher's dog. So I thought 2v1 we could take him here, but nah, like Mark just cowers in his freezer, waits for the killer to leave, and then lives his best life in the next scene, mate.
Oh wow, okay. No, it's quite surprising. I mean, in terms of the death itself, first thing I think of is it reminds me of Matt's death in Until Dawn. Hook through the throat, hung up sort of thing. But yeah, no, that sucks that Charlie got killed, man, because yeah, I know you said that he was your favourite character and everything. I know he's my favourite character too, but
yeah, like you say, I think one of the most gutting parts about losing Charlie here at this point is that I wouldn't get more of Paul Kaye's brilliant acting, because I just loved his delivery throughout the game. So yeah, it just sucked to leave him at this point, especially like I said, after doing so well with him. But hey, what can you do? I'm just being dead honest. I'm at 2 out of 5 at this point. So yeah, I was hoping that I would survive with the other 2. And I must add as well, I was left with my least favourite 2. So it's funny how that one worked out.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact as well that Paul Kay and Jesse Buckley, the 2 stars, have been killed off, haven't they? It is weird. I know that happened with me a little bit in Man of Medan. You sort of find the dull characters stay alive. So this is obviously your turn experiencing that.
Of course. I mean, we'll wrap it up there, guys. But yeah, join us in the next episode where, if you haven't seen my gameplay, find out what but more importantly, what Jack does and who will get out. It will probably be the final part of our Devil and Me analysis. We hope you've enjoyed this chapter. Let us know about everything you did in this, from like whether you had the glitches, whether you had any deaths at this point, and just your overall thoughts and theories around this part of the game. It's been a pleasure doing this for you guys again. Join us in the next episode.
Catch you later, guys.